Welcome in. We're the Real Selection Committee. My name's Mike. This is Greg. We have Will. And today we're going to go over the conference championships. We're going to go over this week 14 coming up, rivalry week here. We're going to have some conference champion scenarios, and then we're going to have games, and we're going to pick who's going to win, point spreads. What do you think coming into this week? Week 14, this last weekend was crazy with all these upsets. So, and we're not done yet. We still got this week 14 going.
As we all know, rivalry week can be really crazy. You know, it sounds stupid when people say it, but records really don't matter, especially when you get a team that is 500 or better. It doesn't matter what the records are because these teams live the season long to play one another. So, and we have seen countless times in the past where that underdog has come through in flying colors. So let's just wait and see what happens. We could have another week where, you know, we're changing everything up next week.
Yep. You know, it's always fun when you can play spoiler, but it's even sweeter when you can play spoiler to a team you hate.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a lot of fun matchups going on. You know, the typical week 14 slate that we love to see every year, and it's gonna be fun diving into them.
Yeah. So, you know, one of these questions that's coming up in my mind, and I've been hearing rumbling going on, is how will losing this championship game affect the loser here? You know, some of these SEC schools, you know, you lose that game, you could have 3 losses on your resume. Now, is that going to knock you out and open up the door for another SEC school or someone else that's fighting in, trying to get into this playoff? So is this an extension? Is this week 15, you know, you lose, you're out? It's basically, is that scenario going on?
Well, if it were up to me, I would get rid of the championship games altogether because it's one extra game where a team could take the risk of losing players. And we saw last year how that affected a team, right? Now, there's only 4 teams last year. Yeah. But this year, let's say Georgia loses their quarterback, right? But they win. Are we going to take them out because now they're not the same team? So I think take the championship games out of the equation, or every other team in college football has to play a knockdown week to keep everybody even record-wise, because these teams playing in that championship game, the teams that lose were better than the teams behind them. That's why they're there. So should we punish them because they get an extra loss? I don't think so. But we'll, you know, who knows what the committee actually has on their minds.
I think it's case by case. I'm all for
Very
conference
much.
championships because it's almost what you play for. If you're a team like Arizona State, you're realistically you're gonna make playoffs, but you're probably not gonna win it all.
Right.
But winning the Big 12, that's a trophy in the trophy case that may pull in some recruits for you. So I'm still here for it. It will give you a playoff berth, so you at least can say I made the playoffs. So I'm for it. It's definitely case by case because, you know, you get a team like Texas and Georgia is right now the SEC championship. If it's a close game, Georgia's already beaten Texas. I don't think they'll slide too much. I mean, they would still have the better resume than teams like Bama, Ole Miss, Tennessee. They beat Tennessee, so they'd have the head-to-head right there. But it's going to be interesting for a smaller team. Yeah, I mean, you know, say the rankings come out and Arizona State's ranked 12th and they lose the Big 12 championship. I think they're out.
Right.
The team that beats them's in. It's just how it goes. It's one more game on the schedule. I think it's an honor to get to play that extra game.
Right.
I agree. That's a very good way to look at it because it does open up the door to some of these teams that don't have that fighting chance. Yeah, the big, rough, tough SEC, they're going to throw in 4 or 5 teams every year is the way it looks, but it opens the door for the Mountain Wests and your Big 12s and some of these what you'd call probably not as strong conferences. It opens the door and slides in one of these teams and gets them exposure into these playoffs. Right. That's what I think is great about that. You get a bye, right? You win your conference, you're going to get a bye, or you best case scenario, you might be a 5th seed. So it works out good. One more question I have is really crazy, but the success that all of these teams that moved conferences that have done really well. I mean, they moved right into these conferences and took over. Texas, they're ahead of the SEC. Oregon, they're ahead of the Big Ten. SMU, they're ahead of the ACC. I mean, how crazy is this right now with these teams jumped in these conferences?
But the funny thing about that is, how many times have we heard over the years analysts and fans from down south say, well, you're not going to come into the SEC and run the roost here, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's funny because when they brought in Texas A&M years ago, now Texas A&M really hasn't won it, but who has been a tougher competitor than them to Alabama? Yeah. They have played Alabama tough since they've gotten in there. They have times. That's right, and they have proven that these schools and the SEC fans thought the Big 12 was a joke. Yeah. Well, Texas A&M came in and stayed on par, and Missouri is the same thing in the SEC as they was in the Big 12. They were kind of that run-of-the-mill team that some years would go higher and some years lower. So I think it's great. It just shows that this is why we play the games. Mm-hmm. This is why we can't put all the weight on one conference and say they deserve 7 teams, right? So it's been interesting. That's an interesting fact that none of us would have probably thought could happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's cool too because when you look at these teams prior to joining as well, Oregon beat Ohio State before joining the Big Ten. Texas just beat Bama before joining the SEC. So these teams, they've proved before joining that they can hang. Mm-hmm. And the other thing too, you got to look at too is game planning. I mean, Ohio State's game plan for Michigan and vice versa for the past how many years?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How often have they game planned for Oregon? How often have they game planned for USC? So, it's the first year. Things might shift as teams start to get more acclimated to game planning for these teams, but it's been fun. And, it also has a lot to do with these stadiums that you're playing in now. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a lot more big matchups going to big stadiums like Ohio State at Oregon. It's tough to win there. Mm-hmm. And we saw that earlier in the season. But I love it. I didn't know how I felt when it first happened, but I've loved the competition. Now, there's still a part of me that holds on to the geographically, conferences going by where they're located, Pac-12 being on the Pacific Coast, ACC. It still hurts to think Stanford and California are in the Atlantic coastal conference.
It's hard.
But the competition towards the top has been really fun this year.
Yeah, I think it's been an amazing move, and they moved right in and blended right into the conferences and have looked pretty good. So with that being said, let's just go over these scenarios right now, and then we'll get into these matchups and games here. So right now, the ACC, let's talk about that. SMU's in, win or lose, they're in. All right. So Miami's in a situation, they win, they hold that second spot, they play in the championship. Then we got Clemson. Clemson's hoping Syracuse upsets Miami, then it opens the door for them. But they got a tough, this doesn't factor in, but they play South Carolina. Mm-hmm. So who do you think's going to represent the ACC here?
Well, and I don't think it's hard to say this. I think Miami, although right now they're outside looking in, I think Miami is the team that's going to get that second berth. And I do believe they will beat SMU in the ACC championship game. It's not going to be easy by any stretch because I think we've all said and we all sing SMU's praises. They are a very good football team.
Oh, yeah.
But as far as Clemson goes, their only shot in my mind of getting into playoffs is to win the ACC. They got that tough game with South Carolina, and we've said it. South Carolina is not the team you want to see when you got to win a game or you're coming off a big game. And Clemson has kind of struggled with them lately. So
a lose is they're out.
They're out.
So you're saying.
Yeah.
It's crazy to think that Clemson rather could lose the game and still be in the ACC championship. 3-loss and still playing for that spot. But I will say if Clemson beats South Carolina, handles business, especially in blowout fashion, I think the door opens up for them as a 2-loss team to be put in that playoff at large. So I don't think their whole saving grace in the playoffs is on Miami and that result. Obviously, it gets a lot easier if Miami fumbles against Syracuse and Clemson has a crack at SMU. But I think if you're playing at home, if you go in there, handle your business against the Gamecocks, win that rivalry game, and you're sitting at 10-2, who's to say some more things don't happen in front of you as well? I think you're sitting pretty. I had them in my rankings just outside of my top 12, and I think that there is room for them as an at-large team.
Okay. Yep. So let's move on. Now we'll talk about the Big Ten. Oregon's in, win or lose. They're the one half of the two teams in this Big Ten championship game. Ohio State controls their own destiny. They're the driver in this car right now. They win, they're in. They're playing Oregon. What a great matchup that's going to be. Next team after that's Penn State. Penn State's hoping for Michigan to keep that win streak going. And then after that, if both those two teams would lose this weekend, Indiana climbs back into that game right there. This would help Indiana out tremendously as far as making it into the playoffs if they got in. This is a team here. If they lost in that championship game, I don't think it hurts them. I think it helps them. So, how do you think this Big Ten is going to work out?
I think all four teams are pretty comfortable at getting in, especially with what we just saw last week in the SEC. And I don't think there's any question that the Big Ten is probably the second strongest conference overall, and they're as strong as any conference, top heavy. But I think OSU and Oregon, barring Michigan coming out, and hey, hopefully Ohio State don't go in that game with their head up the rear end, because if they do, they'll lose. Just like they did 2 of the last 3 times they played Michigan. I feel the Buckeyes were the better team, and Michigan ran them out of the building both games. Mm-hmm. And last year, Ohio State wasn't as good as Michigan and actually gave a pretty good effort and could have won that game last year. So hopefully Ohio State rights the ship. Everything's right in front of them. But I think all 4 teams are going to get in. Personally.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's Oregon, Ohio State. When you're looking at things that are in their favor, you're home. You're playing a team that just lost Indiana and that you just whipped Indiana. And, you've got everything in front of you. Michigan's just reached bowl eligibility. Now, if you're Michigan, though, you do have that opportunity to play spoiler and keep the win streak at 4.
Sure.
But I think this is an Ohio State win. I'm not going to put away the fact that it might be a good game, because it is the game. But I think Ohio State handles business. It is, what if things go crazy and Ohio State, Penn State, and Indiana all lose? Obviously Indiana's playing Purdue, which, by the way, Purdue, a team I feel really bad for. It seems like they're always the team after a heartbreak, and then they just get throttled. It's happened all season.
Yeah.
But Indiana and Penn State have the favorable matchups, but I think Ohio State handles business. I think we get a rematch.
Yeah, I as well think that's going to shape out that way. Let's go to the SEC here. Georgia's already claimed their half of the ticket here. So it's a lot easier this week than it was last week with those teams getting beat. You didn't know. It was like, who knows? It was up and down. Every team was in play here. Now it's pretty simple. It looks like Texas, they win. They're definitely in. They're playing Georgia. Or if A&M beats Texas, they punch their ticket in and they play Georgia. Texas could afford to lose this game and still get into the playoffs, but I think Texas wants to get into this championship game.
SEC is a little bit of a victim of its own power, And the funny thing here is, we looked at this 2 weeks ago and we were like, who knows how this is going to go, right? And now it's probably the simplest of all the divisions, because the winner of Texas and Texas A&M plays Georgia. We know that. But I think we're looking at Georgia, Texas. Here's another rematch that I think the entire country wants to see. And we will see what happens with some of them teams that just lost in the SEC. They're not done by any stretch, but they have work to do. And I feel one of them could sneak back in, but for more than that, they're going to need some help. I think they could get 4, but more than that, they need help.
Yeah, I agree. It's looking like it's going to be Georgia, Texas. It's never easy to go into College Station and win a football game. But, you just look at the resumes, and Texas, they've had stronger wins. Texas A&M's had some heartbreaking losses.
Yeah.
I just think that the story is there. First year in the SEC, you get your crack at the team that's been running the conference for the past few years.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And let's keep in mind, Texas and Texas A&M is that rivalry that was interrupted by A&M coming into the Southeastern Conference. And what a way to start that back up. And a bunch of the marbles are on that game, huh?
Yeah. Texas A&M needs it more, that's for sure.
You're right.
All right, so now we're going to move on to the Big 12. Right now, it's a 4-way tie between these teams here. Arizona State win in. Iowa State win in. BYU needs help. And Colorado is the 4th team in this mix there. So how do you see this shaping out?
The Big 12 is turned upside down. Brigham Young and Colorado 2 weeks ago were the favorites, and now they're the two hoping for help. Arizona State, Iowa State win, you're in. That would be a heck of a matchup, although I like what I see out of Arizona State a little better than Iowa State, even though Iowa State seems like they've righted the ship a little bit here. But Brigham Young needs Arizona State or Iowa State to lose. Colorado needs 2 of the 3 to lose to get in, and that's how that breaks down.
Yeah.
I think that there is a bigger chance than people think that BYU and Colorado is the Big 12 championship. You look at the schedule coming up, Colorado's got probably the easiest. Oklahoma State's been really struggling this year. Now, they're no pushover. They do have talent. And then BYU, they're playing Houston. They both got teams that are 4-7, 3-8. Arizona State, they're going on the road against Arizona, who's shown flashes, especially, with their quarterback and receiver tandem they have over there. And they can play spoilers with rivals. And then you also have Iowa State, who's playing Kansas State, who is just that team that just missed out in this conference. So I think that the odds are greater than we think with BYU Colorado. However, I do think Arizona State's going to handle business, and I think BYU as well. I think Iowa State might fall out for me. I think they get beat by Kansas State. But, BYU, I think we'll still find a way to sneak in there.
Very possible.
Yep. So we'll go over Mountain West here. Boise State's already in. Now we got UNLV and Colorado State are the 2 other teams that are trying to get that other half of the ticket into the Mountain West championship game.
Boy, I'll tell you what, Colorado State was the recipient of a very weak schedule. They didn't play anybody in the Mountain West that was of any worth other than Fresno State. And thank goodness Fresno State took care of business. And the only reason I say that, it's not that I dislike Colorado State, but I wanted to see Boise State, UNLV one more time.
Yeah.
And it looks like we're going to see it. Now, things can happen because UNLV, I believe, plays Nevada, which is their rival. So things can happen. And Boise State struggled with Wyoming last week. Well, they're in no matter what, so it doesn't really matter. But this is something I've been saying for the entire season. I wanted to see UNLV and Boise State come down to that. Looks like we're going to get it. And that's another one of them games that I think people would not mind seeing again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's going to be Boise State and UNLV as well. Out of spite of Nevada playing 13 regular season games, I hate when they do that. I'm taking UNLV to beat them, but no, I think UNLV is the better team. They got a chance to get that 10-win season, which isn't always on the radar for a team like UNLV. And I think they won that rematch as well as Boise State. Yeah. I mean, that was another good game. I don't think anybody would be complaining if we got to see that one again too. There's a lot of conference championship rematches that we could see that would be really fun.
Outstanding.
Yeah. So our last one we're going to talk about might play a role into this is the AAC, the American Athletic Conference. It's down to 2 teams. They're already in. Army, Tulane. If Boise or Mountain West falters, and especially Boise State, one of these teams might, with the higher seed, get in there if Tulane would win this game. How do you see this? Army wins or Tulane?
Well, the AAC is a nice conference. And theoretically, as we were speaking earlier, we kind of feel the American is overall better than the Mountain West. But the teams up top, they're kind of on par with one another. It's a shame Tulane lost both their games to the Power 5 teams that they played. No, they were close games. They lost to Kansas State and Oklahoma. But Tulane has a legitimate shot at getting in there, especially if UNLV upsets Boise. And hey, let's not just count Army out. Like I said last week, it's easy to lean towards Tulane, but Army proved by not giving up in that rough game with Notre Dame that they're going to come to play.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be an interesting matchup. I think Tulane wins it, but we'll see.
I like Tulane a lot. Preseason, they were my pick to be the team representing the Group of Five, and they're still in it. I think. Obviously, if they handle business against Memphis, they've already locked in the American Athletic Conference title game. The big thing is Memphis. I mean, if they lose to Memphis, they're still in that conference title game, and they can win that and still be out, even if Boise State fumbles away something, just because.
Yeah.
If they lose that game to Memphis, they might fall in the rankings. So it's going to be there's a lot of implications going on here with the Group of Five that you might not have really thought about. So.
There's another sad thing. Memphis is 9-2, but their schedule was kind of soft. They lost a couple games in conference. They lost to Navy, I know that, and then they lost to
UTSA.
Yeah, and UTSA's kind of come on down the stretch too. But it's a shame. I would really like to have seen Tulane and Memphis playing for marbles.
Yeah.
But hey, we'll see what happens. Now, what happens if Tulane bombs Army and Boise struggles with UNLV? Now that opens up the door for a lot of conversation as to who Boise or Tulane.
The biggest thing they'll look at there would be the fact that where were the losses? Look at the losses, and that's Boise State would have the advantage. The Oregon loss looks much better than Tulane's 2 losses.
Yeah.
To Oklahoma
without a doubt.
Kansas State.
Now we're going to get into picking some of these games here. We randomly went through and picked out some of the big games we thought. So let's get this started here. Our first matchup, I'm going here. South Carolina travels to Clemson, and Clemson is favored by 3 points, and South Carolina's hot right now. So I don't know. Clemson's in trouble in this matchup.
I'm going to take South Carolina wins the game by a touchdown. I think they're better than Clemson, and I think South Carolina is that team, as we discussed. You do not want to see them when you need to win a game or you're coming off a big game, because South Carolina, there's something about them that they are just that team.
Yeah, you said 3. I'm going to go South Carolina covers. I think this is a game that if Clemson wins, it'll be down to a field goal type game. If South Carolina wins, I think it's a blowout. Not a blowout, but they handle business. Yeah. I could see them winning by 10. So I'm going to go South Carolina to cover. As far as winning, this is a really tough matchup because I agree. South Carolina, I mean, they're a team you don't want to play right now. I'm going to say South Carolina goes in there and wins this game, but I think they definitely cover either way.
Yeah. South Carolina is tough. Clemson needs it more, but I think South Carolina is going to win this game. I say 10 points at least. South Carolina is going to win this game. Notre Dame traveling out to Southern California playing USC. Notre Dame's favored by 3.5.
Big rivals here.
Yeah.
And blue blood type teams.
Yeah.
And here we have another spot that really looks funny to me.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I mean, Notre Dame is eating people up, and USC to me is a decent team, and they can be explosive. I'm taking Notre Dame to win by 2 touchdowns. I just think they're, even though it's out in USC, Notre Dame's used to playing them. I think Notre Dame wins by 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I think this line is a little disrespectful, honestly, to the Irish, especially the way they've been playing. It's tough because, like you said, going out to USC is never easy, but they've handled their business out there before. 2017 is kind of the feeling I'm getting from this game where Notre Dame went out there and put up actually the same score that they just put up on Army. I don't know if it'll be that bad from USC, but I agree. I think this is at least a double-digit win for the Fighting Irish. So I go they cover, and I think they cover handedly.
Yeah, I agree. This is a year that USC's down. They're struggling at, winning games. Notre Dame is so hot right now. They're beating everyone up that's in front of them. They had one stumble, but they've proved that they're way better team than that. I think Notre Dame beats them by 10 points or more. So this is an easy pick for me is Notre Dame winning this game. So we'll go with here's a big rivalry game. Auburn travels to Alabama. Alabama's favored by 11.5. Now, here's the one thing I want to say. Now, if Alabama goes in there and smokes Auburn, I don't want to hear that's a great win because Auburn is down. I know Auburn had a big victory this last weekend, but how do you see this game playing out?
That's a weird spot. Again, Alabama just went out there and looked hapless against a mediocre Oklahoma team. And Auburn goes out there and basically dashes Texas A&M's hopes. So it's a funny spot. I think Alabama is going to put it on Auburn. I know it's a rivalry game, and it would not shock me if Auburn hangs in there for a half, but I think what's going to happen is Alabama in the second half is going to pull away and win by 21. That's what I think.
Yeah, for me, let's dive back into history a little bit. 2016 in Alabama wins by 18. We go to Auburn, Auburn wins. Alabama wins by 30 at home. Auburn wins at Auburn. Alabama wins by like 30 at home. Then 2-point Alabama win at Auburn. Alabama wins by 22 at home. The story of this is Alabama's at home. I think, coming off that loss against Oklahoma, they know that there's not much left for them in hopes of the playoffs at this point. A lot has to happen in front of them, but they know that they have to win this game. I think Alabama goes out there and handles business, and I think they cover.
Yeah, I agree. So to me, there's going to be no kick six victory for Auburn in this game. Alabama's just going to go out since they got steamrolled last weekend. They're going to handle business. They're going to mop up Auburn. They're going to cover that. They probably will win by 3 touchdowns in this game. I don't think Auburn's going to hang in here. I'm sticking with Alabama, trying to climb back into the mix.
And, not to elongate this, but I do think Alabama and Ole Miss, if they take care of business and we see some chicanery, in the words of Gorilla Monsoon, they could sneak back in there with 3 losses. And I, at the beginning of the season, did not think 3 losses deserved to be in. But with what we've seen,
who knows?
Let's wait,
All right. Here's another big rivalry, and this is for the second half of the SEC ticket here. Championship game is Texas versus Texas A&M, and Texas is favored by 5.5 points.
Well, this is one of those rivalries that I am very happy is back on. However, I think Texas is going to come in there, and Texas knows they can have a chance to erase that loss to Georgia. I think Texas wins this game, 31-17, something along them lines. Texas A&M makes it interesting. They're not going to go down like a bunch of bums, but I do think Texas wins by 14 or so.
Yeah, I'm going to go Texas covers as well. I think this is an easy pick for me. Texas A&M just feels like that team that likes to go 8-4. And right here with a loss, they finish with that 8-4 record.
Yep.
They'll keep it scrappy. They'll play tough all season, but they just can't get over that hump.
Right.
I think Texas is playing for more. They want that shot at Georgia. So I go Quinn Ewers and the Longhorns take this one in College Station.
Yeah, Texas is going to come out and win this game, but it's only going to be by 7 points, by a touchdown. What a good battle this is going to be. Texas A&M is going to hang in there, but I think Texas, like you said, has a better team. All right, so the last game we're going to go is the game. We're going with Michigan and Ohio State. It doesn't have quite that high luster on it because Michigan is not having the best year this year. Ohio State's favored by 20.5. How do you see this playing out? It is a rivalry game.
We have seen plenty of times, especially during Ohio State's when they ran off all them wins, where they were way better than Michigan, but Michigan's found a way to keep those games close. And I don't know if anybody was watching, but they put 50 up against Northwestern. Now, I don't know if it was all offensive points, but they got 50 points against Northwestern. So somewhere along the way, Michigan's kind of saying the Buckeyes are in our sights. 20.5 is kind of Ohio State wins this game, but I think it's a 34-17 type win. I don't think they cover the 20.5 against Michigan. Just me.
I'm in the same boat. I think Ohio State obviously is playing for a lot more. We all want that Oregon rematch. I think Ohio State goes in there and wins. They snapped the 3-game skid with the Wolverines, but I don't think they cover. I think plus 20.5 is a fun line to play with in a rivalry game, and I'm going to go the Wolverines cover, but the Buckeyes win.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I'm going against both of you guys. I'm sticking with Ohio State, mopping them up. Ohio State's defense is great. Michigan's offense sucks. I don't think they're going to score many points in this game. I'm thinking it's going to be 31-7, 31-3. I think they're going to blow them out. I think this is a statement, another game here that Ohio State has marked on a calendar from the end of last year till now. It is time to right the ship and get back to winning these games against Michigan. I think they're going to beat them bad.
One thing I want to add about this game, too, that's kind of fun is we talk about on paper how good Ohio State is, but there's just something about Michigan in this game that no matter what, no matter, like you said, when they were playing their worst football, when they were in the Brady Hoke days and the Rich Rodriguez days, they were still keeping up with this Ohio State team. But even when I'm saying Michigan covers the spread, I'm still looking probably a 17-point game for Ohio State. I'm not saying Michigan covers and it's close.
Right.
I still see like 31-14.
I think it'll be close for a while, and it wouldn't shock me if Michigan if the game especially in the first half, has some of that feeling to it, because Michigan's down, but they're still not a bad team.
Oh, and I mean, I think the Buckeyes had a great first quarter this season, but I think they've had some of the best second, third, and fourth quarters of any college football team in this country.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Ohio State has to control that line of scrimmage, especially on the defensive side. The last 3 years, Michigan has been able to run the ball on them and run them over, and has pulled away and beat Ohio State when they weren't the better team. So you're right, but I just think that this is the right ship right here, that Ohio State's going to prove that this is why all these guys come back. They all came back to beat Michigan. And then the next step is to keep going. This is the game where their defense stands up, holds tight, shuts them down, and Will Howard has got to play mistake-free in this game. And I think if he handles business, they're way better than Michigan.
I think the offensive and defensive lines for Ohio State better do their job.
Sure.
They got their butts whipped the last 3 years. That's one thing Michigan always has, is some studs up front. And Ohio State better be prepared to handle that, because that's the one thing Michigan does have.
I also want to say I think this is a big game for Ryan Day in his job.
The
at
hot
Ohio
seat,
State.
yeah.
Yes. I mean, he's done everything you wanted him to do this season. Obviously, you'd want him to beat Oregon, but your only loss is a 1-point loss to the number 1 team in the country. You're sitting here, though, and your kryptonite has been the Wolverines of Michigan. This is a very important game, because if you lose this one, who knows where that leaves you sitting. You're probably out of the Big Ten title game, so you can't win the Big Ten. You're now 4 straight losses to Michigan, who have only won those games since, in my lifetime, it feels like, since the millennium, against Ryan Day. So this is a big game for him and his job at Ohio State.
Well, that's going to do it. What a great season we have going on, and it's just about to turn the page to the next chapter, which is going to be even better, this playoff format. We're going to love that. And, hey, we want to thank you guys for watching. Like and subscribe. Peace.
Peace.